In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Christ is in our midst. Sometimes we hear people speak about a glass being full of water, but only halfway. And we hear them say the glass is half full, and some others say the glass is half empty. And we hear that phrase, the way it's responded to, and the response that we give explaining the glass and how much water is in it, gives an idea of our disposition in life. Are we a pessimist or are we an optimist? And it's kind of unfair to pigeonhole someone into one category just because they look at a glass a certain way. But really, the deeper meaning today of how we see things is captured in the gospel. And how I mean that is by saying that Christ in the gospel today speaks about our eyes and what we're looking at. Are we looking at things that are full of light, or are we looking at things that are full of darkness? And in the things that we look at, we also find our disposition in life. If we're seeking the dark in things, or are we seeking the light in things? Christ always looks at people and tries to find their inner beauty as he heals them, as he encounters them, and tries to make them shift their focus from sometimes seeking the darkness to seeking the light and seeing the light that was right in front of them in the person of Christ. But we also see that many times in the gospel, there's people who he encounters that just don't get it. They don't understand exactly who's in front of them. They don't see the light. And as we sing in the liturgy after Holy Communion, what's the hymn that we sing is, we have seen the light, the true light. We have received the heavenly Spirit. We have received the true faith. And do we understand what that means, really? When we encounter Christ, we have seen the light, but do we continue to share that light in our lives? Or do our eyes become dim as we leave the church? In the icons, and many of the most beautiful icons that were ever written in the history of the Orthodox Church, it's not about the color of the clothing, it's not about who's in the icon or the particular scene, but many times when you see an icon, you can look into the eyes of the icon, and you can see that if any of these icons in the church, if their eyes were big and buggy in the icons, and they were kind of these big, awkward-looking eyes, you would say that the icon is not pretty at all. It's not reflecting a beauty. But in the eyes, you can see a solemnity, you can see a seriousness, you can see many times into the personality of the actual saint that's being depicted. And that's by the grace of God through the hand of the iconographer. When we look at each other, too, we can also see many times how another person is by the look in their eye. Many times when someone encounters someone who they might be either attracted to as a younger person seeking a soulmate for life, you can see it in their eyes. Do you see how they look at each other? Do you see how their eyes lit up when that person came into the room? Or their eyes reflect a joy and excitement. We see surprise in the eyes of people when you say something that might be shocking, and the eyes are brightened, but the eyebrows furl. And then when we say something that is exciting and joyful, the eyebrows stay up with the eyes that open up. So the eyes become a barometer of what's happening on the inside. So when Christ says the eyes are the lamp of the body, it's not that we look into someone's eyes and we see like glowing, flashlights behind the eyes, but we see a disposition in the eyes. Is someone able to look at someone when they speak to them? Are they looking down in a sense of shame or humility, or are they looking up to God with eyes that are weeping? The eyes say so many different things to those whom we encounter. But it's not about evaluating the eyes of others that Christ is speaking about. It's about what is in our own eyes. The other day somebody had said in a conversation, they were shown a particular article that had some pictures, and the pictures were rather graphic about some violence, and they said specifically, "I can't unsee this." I can't unsee this. In other words, I've already seen it, and now it's stuck. And we can't go backwards and say, I wish I didn't see that. But how many times do we tempt our eyes with seeing things that we shouldn't see and things that scar us for life? You know, working with veterans and law enforcement for so many years, you can tell, and so many of you who have been in the military in the past and have seen active battle, you can't forget what you see. You can't forget these traumatic and violent scenes that have been seen by so many. And what happens in the end, if it's not dealt with prayerfully and carefully, is it becomes a vision of torture for people in the years to come. Not all of us will have those traumatic scenes that we will witness, but with the things that we choose to put in front of our eyes, whether it's a horror movie, whether it's something inappropriate on television, or whether it's something that we put ourselves in a position, in a place, in a venue that offers something that is negative for our eyes, we can't unsee it. And we have to be very careful about how we program what we're viewing. On television, in society, everywhere now, there's no more rules on anything. Even when we look at the ratings for television shows, it doesn't really matter what the rating is. You still have to be very careful if there's something that you think you might want to see, but you're not quite sure of everything that is being shown in that particular movie or television show. And one of the nice tools these days is a database called IMDb, which has a parent's critic guide, which tells you if a movie is appropriate for children. And the parent's critic, it tells you about language, it tells you about violence, it tells you about all these other different things that you can preview on this database that will list out in the movie what it is and see if that is appropriate for younger viewers as well as for us as well. But the eye has to be trained. You know, sometimes we see that people are always looking for, I mean, it's a phrase, they're always looking to make a quick buck, right? Or they're always looking as a wolf on another person. Or they're always looking for the negative in someone or in something. We have to train our eyes. And how do we train our eyes? Christ says specifically in the latter part of the gospel that we have to seek God. There's two things we can look for in life. We can look to serve God, or we can look to serve ourselves. And the word mammon really, I don't think I've ever experienced someone in a daily conversation who has ever used the word mammon. I think most people think it's an elephant that was extinct in the Ice Age, and that's it. But what is mammon? Is really serving ourselves, our own desires, our own will. And Christ says specifically that we can't do that. You can't do everything to please yourself and only please yourself, and you can't simultaneously please God while you're doing your own will. There's one will that we should seek, which is God's will. But if we seek our will, is it really God's will? Or is it the things that we want to do? Is it the things that we choose for our lives? So what is this gospel saying to us today? It's saying we need to seek to do God's will in all things. How do you do that? You ask. You reach out to God and say, God, please help me to make the right decisions for this day. And for the things that are in the future that we might be planning for, we also have to ask that God's will be done in those things that are future events that we might be trying to mold so deeply in a certain way that it might be completely opposite of what God's will is for us. And the other thing, too, is we have to train our eyes. We have to not think as children in the way of youthful things, as far as when St. Paul says, when I was a child, I thought like a child, and when I'm grown, I think as an adult. And what he's saying there is not to have our eyes focused in a way that is youthfully ignorant And I think that I wouldn't say that that is necessarily small children, but I think something happens in high school and college that makes our eyes wander. It makes us wander for the faith. It makes us wander for morality. It makes us wander for what is the reality of life. And our eye starts going everywhere. And we know this statistically from those who have fallen away from the church are from the years of 18 to 22. And those years are what? The college years, where everything is put in front of the eyes of our youth, and they look at all these different directions, and they lose sight of the will of God many times in their lives. So program what your eyes are watching and what they're looking at. You should always start your day by looking at one thing. Now everybody looked up. Everybody's kind of like, well, what is it? And I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. The one thing that you should look at every day as you get up from bed is find the icon of Christ somewhere in your home. If you don't have it next to your bed, put it next to your bed. If you don't have it in your home at all, stop at the bookstore and get a little icon card, put it on your steering wheel or next to your speedometer, because you probably look at your speedometer more as you're rushing to your day than you probably look at some of your family members, right? You're looking down, up, down, up, down. Am I doing 62 and a 35 or whatever? And put an icon so that you have that vision in your mind. And just think about it for a second. You know, there's a print on the internet. It's a black and white, and it's kind of like globby, and it's got 3 dots in the middle. And you can kind of tell it's somewhat of a face, but it's black and white only. And what you do is you stare at the 3 dots. And as you stare at the 3 dots, you stare at it for like 30 seconds or a minute, and then you close your eyes, and your eye produces the negative of what you were seeing, which is actually very close to the face of Christ. So you can look that up at home. You can look up 3 dots, Christ, image, negative, or whatever, however you want to search it, and you'll see it. And you'll see 3 dots in the middle, and you'll see kind of like hair. But when your eyes close, you see it. But when our eyes close, what do we see sometimes? We might see nothing, or we might look to see God. So even when our eyes are closed, we should be seeking the vision of God. What does God want me to do? And the best thing to do would be to take an icon that is that you really like. I know some people really have an affinity to one particular icon or another, and try and find the icon of Christ and memorize what it looks like. Without looking up, could you draw what the dome looks like? Do you know what Christ looks like in the dome? And one of the interesting things of the dome icon is Christ angles out like a triangle. His clothing comes out like this because he is leaning out as if in heaven, looking down. Now you can look up. You can see that he's leaning out, and the triangular shape of his presence overshadows all of us. But maybe that icon is the most beautiful icon to you, or maybe the one in the back. I don't know what it is, but try and, when you close your eyes, can you see it? Can you see the little wisps of hair coming down? Can you see the lawn? Can you see his hands? Can you see the gospel? Can you see the gems in there? Can you see the cross as being a 3D cross? And one of the things beautiful on the icon is the cross of Christ is 3-dimensional in his halo. If you've ever noticed that, you always see the lines. Is because it's not a symbolic cross. It is a 3-dimensional cross that Christ went on and suffered for us. But those are the things that we have to program in our minds. Not so much the terrible shows and the movies and the things that will shock and awe us, but the things of God. The things that when we close our eyes, we see, and when we open our eyes, we're looking for it. We're looking for the goodness in the world. We're looking for the goodness in the presence of God throughout all of his creation. So your eye is the lamp of the body, as Christ said. So make sure that you don't smother it and that you don't waste it, but that you share and you look at other people with the love of Christ, and don't look at them and say, look what they're wearing. How did they get away with that? Or look at this person, look at how they're looking at me, look at, or whatever it is. And I think even in saying that, you could feel your face furrow up. And there's one story that I want to leave you with that I've said many years ago of this man, and he's walking down the street. And his guardian angel comes up next to him and starts walking with him. And the man's walking, and the guardian angel says, "So, what do you see?" And he's like, I look around and I see a bunch of miserable people. Look at all these people everywhere. They're all miserable. They're ugly, they're sinful, they're all these things. And he says, the angel says, "Really?" And the man says, "Yeah, look at this guy coming at us right here. Look at him. His back is hunched over, his face is scowling, his nose is crooked. You can tell just by the way he's walking, he's a thief. And he's an adulterer, and he's all these bad things, and you can just see it by the way he's looking. And look, he's coming closer to us, and he's walking, and now I can even see even more the lines of aggravation on his face, and the disgust in his eyes." And the angel says, "You see all that?" And the man said, "Yes, I do. And I see even more in the way he slithers across the ground as a snake, ready to take from others and ready to destroy them." And the angel says, "You see all that, but you're missing one thing." And the man said, "What is that?" "I see everything in this man." And the angel said, "You're walking towards a mirror." Amen.